I sort of describe as, when you're in flow of thought or when you're in flow of sport, you can also be very much in flow of cooking. Being in flow with food, it's the most electric thing for me because you're not thinking at all. You're going through a process, you're holding conversation, the ingredients are familiar, and it's just practice, practice, practice. So the area that we operate in is called the Downtown East Side. It is the largest open-air drug market in North America. It's one of the densest populations of mental illness, but it's also one of my favorite communities in the world because it's honest. I started working in it before I started working with it. Opening restaurants and falling in love with the neighborhood and its character and its age, I was infected with this feeling of we need to do better. Any great idea before it becomes the norm is crazy. And those levels of pain and passion that you go through to get that to be the norm is something that me and my team are completely up for. The token program is a closed currency that allows you to give somebody a sandwich instead of money that you may be worried they'd spend on drugs or alcohol. We thought we'd do 2 or 3 a day. We've done almost 90,000 in 3 years. When you create something beautiful, it has its own life. The token has its own life. And we're now taking it to major city hubs like San Francisco and New York, and then smaller hubs with native populations in Colombia. How can we make systems that are global systems that translate to every city in the world that will actually help economies as well as the people who are in them? That universal energy just flows straight through all of us. And once we can tap into it to co-create with an audience, that's what happens when I come to a stage. And I'm very specific about people understanding the message in a language they understand. And the universal language is love.
Nothing like an amazing technical difficulty to freak you right the hell out before you start. Like, is the audio gonna go on at any point? Thank you, Yarrow Craner, sitting here in the front row. You're gonna hear from him right after our break for putting together that video and constantly being a champion in my corner. I love you, brother. So, I'm jacked up. Yesterday was so much sensory overload, I found myself mid-conversation at dinner last night, completely losing my train of thought. I'm sorry, my mind just turned to baby food, if you can excuse me for a second. Tears, excitement, I just was overwhelmed with what Saul undersold, if possible, amount of talent and passion in the room. So today I want to talk, I was given the opportunity about a month back to be the keynote speaker at Singularity University. Is anybody familiar with Singularity University? Wonderful. They made an interesting call by bringing me in there as a non-futurist to talk about the future of food. And the opening keynote, day one, I am sat right there, dead center, and I'm so excited. I'm like, teach me where we're going. And Peter Diamandis takes the stage, and he puts this slide up. And he says, in 1820, 94% of the world was living in extreme poverty. But today, only 10% lives in it. And I'm staring at him and my mouth is open and I say, bullshit. And people around me are like, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, right, sorry. It was meant to be inside my head. And I went upstairs and I was so mad and I called Yarrow and I called some of my mentors and I was like, why are these people talking about poverty being not a problem anymore? We were at the Hilton Union Square in the Tenderloin in the Mission District when this slide was shown. Has anybody been to the Mission? Holy shit, this is not okay. was like, outside there's a dude, I almost tripped over him this morning sleeping on a mattress. This is what we're gonna do? And no offense to those guys, of course, the future is bright, we're there. Not for the dude sleeping on a mattress, so I got super mad. And I changed my entire presentation for the next day. And we started with this. In 1820, 1.1 billion people lived on the planet, estimated. Interesting. In 2017, 1.3 billion live in extreme poverty. Wait a second. Yeah, bullshit. 3 billion live on less than $2.50 a day. Abundance is everywhere. Not for these people. How about the 1 in 9 people who suffer from chronic malnourishment in this country, on our continent? 400 million plus people. 1 in 9. You don't get to go up and show that slide to 1,500 influencers and feel okay about it without context. So I took it upon myself to give them some context. Will I be invited back to Singularity University? Who can say? Okay, so who inspires you and why? Easy ones. Ali, Gandhi, Mother Teresa. All real good people. Who inspires you? Who do you wake up in the morning and get excited about? I mean, now I got Joe, so that's gonna be fun for me every day. I'm gonna take one of those rings home if that's cool. I really want you to dig deep into this thought and really just, something hits you immediately, right? You're like, it's my grandmother. It's obviously my grandmother. For me, it was both of my grandparents. My grandfathers were both, from nothing, dirt-ass poor, and brought themselves up and were incredible role models for me. My father, the same. But about 7.5 years ago, it pivoted, and this guy became my inspiration. His name is Michael Haggerty. This is the neighborhood I work in. You got to see it vividly portrayed before. Football Mike is his nickname. He spent over 80% of his life incarcerated. Started with petty crime, fraud. Never really hurt anybody, aside from some bankers, which I think everybody's okay with. And because of that, got addicted to heroin. And in heroin abuse, over 30 years of that roller coaster of addiction. And oh my God, living in the system and street entrenched. And I saw Football Mike for the first time when I opened my first restaurant called Bonita, a fine dining restaurant in that neighborhood. And I would see him doing exactly this every day. And I was scared to death of Mike. Now, he doesn't look that physically terrifying, although 30 years in prison gives you some chops, so I wouldn't test him. But I was terrified to speak to him because I didn't know what I would ever say. What would that conversation be like? Hey, pal, how you doing? How's your life been? Like, I don't know. And so many years later, I realized that all of the marginalized people that I now work with, that I decided were marginalized or homeless or impoverished or had mental illness or any of those things, why I wouldn't speak to them originally was my ego. And what do I mean by that? I was scared if they asked me for something that I couldn't give them, and I didn't come to this until later, how would I feel? Guilty? Well, I can just avoid that guilt. Watch me fake a phone call. Watch me cross the street, pretending that's where I'm going, and then cross back a block later. All of those things were in here because I didn't identify. I had a them in my mind. There is no us and them. There's only us. Mike Haggerty, after all of this, there's a story, and I won't share it because it's really long, but you can find it online. He's changed my life. He became a star employee for me. He's worked every day for me since for about 8 years, out of street entrenchment, out of addiction. He's a proud grandfather, and he set the model for our barrier employment program, which I'm so incredibly proud of. But it took one conversation. Mike actually asked me for a couple things I couldn't give him that day. So I said no. We kept talking. It wasn't the end. And he inspires me. When you think you've seen rock bottom, meet some people who lived in the street. There's a whole different level. So at that point, I had 9 operating restaurants, all cool guy restaurants and businesses. I had a gallery. I was making a bunch of money. It was really, really nice. You can see I say that wistfully. And then I found my purpose through Mike and through a bunch of people. My life changed. It altered because I knew that my impact was still in service, but it was in service to people. while I'd been serving halibut for $32 a plate, that was great. I could do better. So one of the things that came to me is, what are the words that you associate with being hungry? A couple, shout some out to me. Fear, cranky, pain, totally. You know what it does? It sucks. Let's wrap all that in together. I think what we do often when we're trying to rally people behind a cause is that we get too emotional. Some of the issues we're dealing with are actually very straightforward and pragmatic. Being hungry sucks. If I got up to do my keynote today without a gluten-free breakfast sandwich, I'd be in a really bummed out way. Thank you, Julia. You know, how can you imagine coming out of street entrenchment, feeling like crap, wondering if the world can see that you're homeless, and then trying to get into an interview or trying to find housing or food, the one basic need that we have to get going. I believe wholeheartedly that we have a responsibility to feed those who need help, real, nutritious food. Not canned navy beans, not macaroni and cheese with powdered death. Get out of here with this shit. Not instant ramen noodles. Has anybody eaten those? Do you know what you feel? Do you know what goes through your butt? Anyway, feed people food. It's really straightforward. You will drink a bottle of Camus and know how many nose hairs the guy in the vineyard had who picked the grape, but you'll eat a burger from a drive-thru and not even know if it's meat. Come on. So our most marginalized really do need to also be fed real food. I want you to eat real food if you couldn't tell. This is one of the farms I operate with. If you've been to a farm, cows aren't generally this friendly. They're usually scared. You know why they're scared? Because guys run around with a cattle prod and hit them. Our farm's not so much. It's a big, beautiful female cow who's always very interested. Now, the next part's a little bit graphic. I run a butcher shop. And my butcher shop knows where the cows come from because I see them and I touch them and they're close. And then we break that animal down and use every single part of it. This goes into our butcher shop. This goes into a grind that goes into my diner and sells burgers. Then it goes into a meal program that services 1,200 people a day who are next meal. You know where that beef comes from? Well, we can go back 2 slides, but I think you're with me. That's real food. All of it's real. But the whole system is important to me. It's not just where the cow comes from. It's who's getting employed to cook that food, how that food is being delivered. Every single question of the system has to be important to us, otherwise you're negating the point. It's like, oh, I'm looking after the environment by doing small batch things and using everything else, but then I drive a diesel truck to deliver it. You really have to think about the whole system. That meal program makes me super proud. We started at 80. We do 1,200 a day. As of the count this morning when I woke up, we've served 1,143 meals into our neighborhood, into a 5-block radius. This, I never thought was possible. Fuck McDonald's, billion served. And these are the guys that do it. Aren't they handsome? Beards are so hot right now. Does anybody see a homeless man there? Anybody? Hard to discern, right? There's a guy who was homeless there as a child. There's another guy who battles mental illness. We're all the same. People want to come to work for purpose. They want to be part of a system that gives a shit, and they want to do things. I mean, looking at these guys, why I had to take a moment is I'm so proud. Every time I look at anybody in my team, I know their story and what they've gone through. I know the struggle. And they found a place. And they get to look at that number every day. We have a board where they change the numbers every day. This is another picture of our cows. There's no relevance to the stream of the story at all. I just like cows. So I stopped doing cool guy businesses and thought more about how can we make systems change by creating blueprints of businesses that make impact. This is a brewery. It's an 11-acre farm on the Sunshine Coast of Vancouver, BC. in a place called Gibson's. It was a flower farm for 25 years. I took it over with the distinct purpose, with my partner Brian Smith, of getting people with developmental disabilities further employed. Why? Why that target? People with developmental disabilities are one of the most isolated populations in the world that stream into homelessness. If you don't have a caregiver, if you don't have a community, if you don't have somebody to look after you and you have limited ability, what happens? So we employ 13 people on average at this place. It's a community. It's a real place. And one of my mandates is I work in a lot of tech. Well, maybe not anymore after Singularity, but it's important that we create real life communities, not only digital ones. Tech is only and will ever only be a tool. It's a tool to get us here. That's what it does. If it does more than that for you, you're using it wrong. If you find yourself 3 hours later when you were gonna go out of the house and Facebook looking at somebody else's life that they're manufacturing that's not real, you're doing it wrong. Get out of the house, do some fun stuff. So this created a community that I had no idea was coming. I really didn't see it. I had this 3 a.m. epiphany of, oh my God, people won't give money to people who are homeless because of drugs or alcohol. I will. But if that's stopping an entire market group for coming and doing this, then we should try to address that. So we do, and we're past 100,000 now. We launched in San Francisco 7 weeks ago with a group called Farming Hope that I mentored. And it's just so exciting to watch people grasp onto the simplest of ideas and get so excited about it. And I'm super proud of it. Now, pivoting really quickly, that group that I was mentoring them at Stanford Farm. I just finished a year-long Civic Innovation Fellowship at the Stanford D School. Incredible. I don't know what Stanford's vetting process is, but obviously it's about as tight as Singularities. And I'm joking, I'm actually kind of clever. They brought me in and I was working on poverty specifically. So everybody's like, oh, you're the homeless guy. I'm like, nah, God, would you stop with that? I care about poverty. That 1 in 9 is a much bigger statistic for poverty and it's growing daily. And so our single biggest challenge socially is poverty. It streams into everything. And that's a whole other talk, but I think you get it. 7 out of 10 North Americans are 1 paycheck away from destitute. 7 out of 10. Do the math. What happens if that all crashes at once? We're in a lot of shit. Now, homelessness is your problem. And why I say you is like, I want to get you mad. I want you to walk out of here and go, what do you mean? The studies, the one that we did in San Francisco, 6 times as expensive to have the services that surround somebody who's chronically homeless than to put them in a home and put the services around them. Where does the money come from for those services? Tax dollars, nice and easy. So if it costs a minimum is twice as much to house someone than it does, to have them homeless than it does to house them, we're doing it wrong. The problem's at least twice as expensive as the solution. That's insane. We know this. That data is there, and we're still doing it. What I care about and why I'm here at BIF and why I came to Peace Love, thank you, Matt and Jeff, is because of this. We are in this era of inspiration and exponential influence. And what I want to do is go from success to significance. I can talk about 100,000 meals, I can talk about 1 million meals, I can talk about all that stuff. But what is the system change? So I started working when I was in Stanford on many experiments. And one of them specifically was in unveiling the skills of people who define themselves and others defined as homeless. When I was 15 years old, I found myself homeless for the first time. I don't define as that. That was a temporary state. I didn't have a house. Shit, I didn't have a car for a while either. I don't walk around and say I was carless once. Why would I ever do that? That's not who somebody is. It's a state that they're temporarily in. This is Sylvia Martin, my lead researcher on my new project, PAL, or Positive Access Link. Sylvia was street entrenched for over 20 years and street prostitution, was abused the first time at 4. Had a hell ride. She's now a yoga instructor. She fixes bikes in her spare time. And she's a lead researcher on a Stanford digital innovation project. The last part's all that's important. The rest of it's moot. What do I care about? I don't care about the sadness, the overwhelming sadness of how many people are there. My core competencies are around optimism, reality. What's the truth? The truth isn't that it's at 10%. The truth is I almost fell over a dude on a mattress. That's the truth. Transparency, solutions, connectivity, both digital and physical, and opportunity. There's so much opportunity out there for people. The restaurant industry doesn't have anybody to cook or prep anymore because Google will pay them $35 to code. Yet there's a whole population that can't find a job. We need to connect everybody. This is the project I'm working on. It's called PAL, Positive Access Link. And I'm aware that I need to leave you with something a little bit bigger. So I'm gonna grab you. Come up here and hang out with me? Yeah, oh yeah. We don't get to hang out that much and me not put you on stage early. All right, so we're gonna do a contract as an example. How many people are familiar with the law? A little bit. Great. He's like, I'm letting you know, I know the law right now. I'm gonna say something to you and I need you to echo it back to me. We're gonna shake hands on it. These are witnesses. I promise you that I'm gonna leave the world in a better place than I found it. I need you to say the same thing to me.
I promise you, Mark, that I'm gonna leave this world in a better place than what I found.
I believe you. Yes. My man. That was the warm-up. Everybody stand up right now. Look to the person next to you, behind you, in front of you. I don't give a shit where they are. Just look at them. And do the exact same exercise, and please do it quickly. Okay, sit down. I'm a witness. I bore witness today. If you see that person on the street in 6 months, you're like, hey, how's the project going? And like, I'm still looking for my first emotional investor. Give them hell. Give them hell. I'm gonna leave you with this one. Food is our last, best opportunity to stay connected, to gather with our people and build communities, to hold on to our humanity, to be. I love you. Thank you.